The more you apologize effectively, the less that you actually need to. Because you start living in a way that's more honest, more compassionate, more congruent. You build a reputation, not just externally, but internally, that you can be trusted, even by your parts. And that reputation is what makes fulfillment possible. So when you fall short, and you will, because we all do, the choice is simple. Will you hide, deflect, collapse into shame and self-pity, and offer up a weak apology that protects your ego, but erodes trust? Or will you face the harm, name it, and take the harder but nobler path of repair?
Welcome to Beyond Success, the podcast for high achievers seeking deeper meaning, fulfillment, and purpose. Now, here's your host, world-renowned leadership coach and therapist, Tian, Ph.D.
At some point, we have all fallen short of our values. Let's be completely honest right from the get-go here. This is not a rare event. In fact, it's part of being human. Sometimes the slip-up is small, like saying you'd call back and then forgetting. Other times, it's bigger. Maybe you've driven home after drinking more than you should have, or you lied to your partner because you were too afraid to tell the truth, or maybe you betrayed the trust of a colleague at work in a way that still gnaws at you. When this happens, a tough question rises up. What do you do next? Do you bury it and hope it fades away? Do you punish yourself? Do you tell yourself that everyone screws up, so it doesn't really matter? None of those really work. The weight, the burden stays. Here's where the distinction between guilt and shame really matters. Healthy guilt says, I did something wrong, I need to repair it. Toxic shame says, I am something wrong, I need to hide. Guilt can guide you back to integrity. Shame pulls you further into the dark until you're cut off, not just from others, but from your actual self. And here's the trap. The higher your standards, the more brutal shame can feel. Ambitious people, whether in dating, relationship, or careers, often hold themselves to impossible ideals. And when they fall short, instead of repair, they collapse into self-loathing. They start avoiding the very conversations, apologies, and amends that would rebuild trust. They hide behind a mask of competence at work or niceness in relationships, while inside they're at war with themselves. The truth is, what you do when you fall below your own values is more important than whether you manage to stay perfect the whole time. This is where real growth happens. This is where character is forged. I'm Tian, a Brown University certified leadership and performance coach, a certified IFS therapy practitioner, and an ICF certified coach. For almost the past 2 decades, I've helped hundreds of thousands of people from over 87 countries find fulfillment, meaning, and success in their personal and professional lives. Okay, so I've got 4 points for this episode, and the first is that guilt and shame often get lumped together, but that they work in completely different ways inside us. One can guide you back to your values, and the other keeps you stuck in self-condemnation. Guilt is healthy. It's a signal. It points out when your actions violated your own standards. It says, you crossed a line, now go fix it. The focus is on the behavior, not on who you are or your identity. If you lied to your partner about something important, guilt doesn't say you're rotten to the core. Instead, it says you weren't honest, and now you need to repair that trust. If you took credit at work for someone else's contribution, guilt urges you to correct it, to give credit where it's due, and to restore fairness. Shame, on the other hand, is toxic. Shame attacks the self. It whispers, you are bad, you're unworthy, hide. Shame doesn't just point to a bad action. It paints the whole person as bad. And when you believe that about yourself, the impulse isn't to repair, it's to cover up, avoid, and run. That's how double lives form. That's how compulsions and secrecy spiral out of control. Psychologists have found this pattern again and again. Guilt tends to correlate with pro-social action, like making amends, apologizing, repairing. Shame correlates with avoidance, repression, and in more extreme cases, pathology. Guilt opens a door back to connection, but shame locks the door and bolts it. Think about this in the case of dating. If you're seeing multiple people casually and you're not upfront about it, your guilt might nudge you to clarify expectations, to be honest, even if, or especially if, it risks rejection. Shame, by contrast, would drive you to hide, to deceive, to pretend you're someone that you're really not, to lie until the lie itself becomes unbearable. Or in leadership, a leader who feels guilt about hogging credit might learn to share recognition more generously. But a leader drowning in shame will avoid accountability altogether and spin stories to protect their image and sabotage trust with their team. C.S. Lewis has given us the metaphor of the compass, suggesting that guilt can act like a compass. It helps you find your way back when you've drifted. But shame is more like a fog. It blinds you, disorients you, and makes you think that you're lost forever. And when you're in that shame fog, you can't see that you're still on a path at all. So the crucial distinction is this. Guilt can be a teacher, can be your moral conscience. Shame is like a jailer. One points you toward repair and reconnection, the other traps you in hiding and self-loathing. And if you're ambitious, driven, or perfectionistic, it's easy to confuse the two because both might feel painful. But one is the pain that leads to healing and learning and growth, and the other is the pain that festers in silence and secrecy. And here's the hopeful part. Once you start to name the difference, once you recognize this is guilt, not shame, then you can respond differently. You can move from paralysis into action, from hiding into repair, from being stuck in a fog to finding that compass. And that shift is what makes growth and integrity possible. Now, the second point is about responsibility. When we talk about responsibility, it's easy to reduce it to mere punishment, like the universe is waiting to slap your wrist if you screw up. But real responsibility is something much deeper. It's about whether other people can trust you, and just as importantly, whether you can trust yourself. And without it, without responsibility, that trust collapses. Take, for example, drunk driving. The obvious danger is the risk that you pose to others. But what doesn't get talked about enough is what it does to your own relationship with yourself. If you know deep down that you've acted recklessly and then you just brush it off, you end up over time corroding your own trust in yourself. Next time you try to assure yourself that you will do the right thing, part of you won't believe it for a good reason. And when you can't count on yourself, then your self-confidence and stability will fall apart. Responsibility does not mean wallowing in self-loathing. That's simply shame sneaking back in, trying to convince you that you're fundamentally broken. Responsibility means facing reality. It means telling the truth about what happened and what harm it caused, not with excuses, not with, I was tired or I didn't mean it. Responsibility sounds like, I did this. It caused this harm. I need to repair it. That's harder than spiraling in shame and self-pity, because spiraling can feel almost safe. It keeps you in your head, replaying the failure instead of actually having to do anything about it. Facing the harm, it takes real courage. It's like exposing an open wound, not to wallow in it, but to clean it out so that it can begin to heal. The great philosopher Michael Sandel often points out that morality is relational, that our moral worth isn't tested only in our intentions, but in how we respond to the harm that we have caused. That's what responsibility is, how we choose to act once the damage is done. You can't erase the action, but you can either compound the harm by hiding from it, or you can begin repair. And here's the paradox. When you take responsibility, you often end up earning more respect than if you'd never slipped in the first place. Leaders who own mistakes directly, without self-pity or deflection, show their teams that they can be trusted with greater responsibility. Partners who admit wrongs honestly create the possibility for deeper intimacy, because honesty, even when painful, builds trust. Responsibility is reality-facing. It doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to have the courage to admit when you have fallen short, to acknowledge the consequences, and to take steps to restore the trust. And if you've been carrying the burden of shame, this is the way out. Responsibility is not self-condemnation. It's self-respect in action. That's why when you screw up, and by the way, everybody does at some point, the most important question is not, how do I hide this? Or how do I prove I'm still good? The real question is, what repair is needed, and how will I do it? Because your answer to that question will define not just your relationships, but your character, your peace of mind, and ultimately your fulfillment in life. Okay, so my third point is the anatomy of a healthy apology. When most people apologize, they reach for the easy way out, the weak apology, the self-pitying apology, the kind that sounds emotional but dodges any real responsibility, like, "I'm sorry that I'm not good enough for you," or "I'm sorry if you felt hurt." That kind of apology is not an act of repair. Instead, it's a shield. It shifts the focus back onto you, your guilt, your shame, and your need to be forgiven, while the real harm you caused stays unaddressed and untended to. A strong apology works the opposite way. It names what actually happened. It acknowledges the damage it caused. It expresses real remorse without self-pity. And then it offers repair. Finally, it commits to a change of behavior that makes trust possible again. The anatomy of an effective apology has 5 parts. First, acknowledge the act with specificity. Vague statements like, "I messed up," or "I wasn't my best self," are not enough. Those are not part of a healthy apology. The person you hurt needs to know that you actually understand what you did wrong. So say the thing plainly, like, "I lied about where I was last night," or "I cut corners on this project," or "I broke your trust by keeping secrets." Without naming it, there's no ground for trust to be rebuilt. Second, acknowledge the impact. Here's where most people fail, especially achievers. They get stuck on their own intentions, like, "I didn't mean to hurt you." But intentions don't undo the pain. If you ran someone over by accident, the fact that you didn't mean it does not make their broken leg heal any faster. The person you hurt wants to know that you understand how your action landed for them. So, "When I lied, I left you feeling unsafe in this relationship." Or, "When I didn't deliver on time like I said I would, I put your reputation at risk with the boss." This step requires empathy. Okay, third, express remorse, not just "I'm sorry." Remorse means that you let yourself feel the weight of the harm. You allow yourself to grieve the gap between the person you want to be and the person you ended up acting as. And that grief signals sincerity. Okay, fourth, offer repair if possible. Sometimes repair is concrete, like paying for damages, or making up the loss to work, or committing to a process that rebuilds safety. Other times, repair is about sustained behavior over time, showing through consistency that you're worthy of trust again. Okay, and fifth and finally, commit to that changed behavior. Without this, the whole apology collapses. It's meaningless. You can say all the right words, but if nothing in your actions change, the words become meaningless. Sometimes success comes with a hidden cost. You might have built a career, a business, or a life you thought you wanted, but inside, maybe you feel burned out or unfulfilled. Or maybe it shows up in your relationships with your partner, your family, or your team, where no matter how hard you try, the same painful patterns keep repeating. If this resonates, I've got something you might be interested in. It's a free 2-minute assessment that helps you uncover the #1 block that's been holding you back in love, in leadership, or in life. And once you take it, you'll get a masterclass tailored specifically to your results, so you'll know exactly where to focus to move forward. It's quick, it's practical, and it can change the way you see yourself and your path ahead. Take the first step right now at dtphd.com/quiz. That's dtphd.com/quiz. Change doesn't need to be perfect overnight, of course, but it does need to be visible, measurable, and anchored in real effort. Take a romantic betrayal. Imagine someone cheats on their partner and gets caught. The weak apology is, "I'm sorry, I've been under stress, I didn't mean to hurt you, I'm not good enough for you." That is actually not repair. That's like theater, it's drama. The strong apology, the healthy apology, sounds more like this. "I betrayed your trust by sleeping with someone else. I know this left you feeling worthless and unsafe. I regret it deeply. I want to take specific steps, like therapy, transparency about my whereabouts, cutting off that other relationship, because I don't want to live in deceit. I am committed to rebuilding your trust, even if it takes a long time. So that would be an apology with strength. It doesn't erase the harm, and instead it gives a real foundation for repair. Okay, or take a workplace example. A manager steals credit for a team member's idea in a meeting, and the weak apology then would be, "Sorry, I just got caught up in the moment. I didn't mean anything by it." That's just about saving face. A healthy apology would be more like, "I took credit for your idea in front of the team, and that disrespected you. It made you look like you weren't the one that was actually driving the project. I regret that, and I want to make it right. In our next meeting, I will make sure to highlight your leadership on this, and I will commit to checking myself before I speak in the future to make sure I don't do it again." So notice the difference. This better apology restores dignity and trust, not just ego. Psychologically, strong and healthy apologies matter because they repair both external trust and internal congruence. When you give a weak apology, part of you knows that you have avoided responsibility. That part, over time, keeps whispering, "We're not trustworthy." And over time, those whispers build into self-doubt, anxiety, fractured relationships. But when you give a healthy apology, you signal to yourself that you're someone who can own up and repair, and that creates inner harmony. You reduce the inner conflict and civil war. C.S. Lewis once said that integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. But repairing after failure is how you show that integrity to the people who are watching, and most importantly, to yourself and to your parts that are watching. And as Michael Sandel might argue, responsibility isn't just about what you owe yourself. It's relational. It's tested in how you respond to the people that you have harmed. Apologies done right are a practice in justice. The good news is that apology is a skill. Like any skill, it gets better with practice. At first, it feels awkward. You stumble over your words. You worry about making it worse. But if you approach it with sincerity, naming the act, acknowledging the impact, expressing remorse, offering repair, committing to change, then you begin to rewire yourself. You start to see apologies not as humiliations, but as acts of strength, acts of courage. And there is a paradox here. The more you apologize effectively, the less that you actually need to. Because you start living in a way that's more honest, more compassionate, more congruent. You build a reputation, not just externally, but internally, that you can be trusted, even by your parts. And that reputation is what makes fulfillment possible. So when you fall short, and you will, because we all do, the choice is simple. Will you hide, deflect, collapse into shame and self-pity, and offer up a weak apology that protects your ego, but erodes trust? Or will you face the harm, name it, and take the harder but nobler path of repair? That's the difference between staying stuck in cycles of self-sabotage and self-pity and moving into the freedom of integrity, courage, and compassion. And the fourth and final point is about making amends and restoring trust. When we talk about making amends, the first thing we have to admit is this: not all harm can be undone. If you betray someone, if you wreck trust in a relationship, there's no way to rewind time and erase what happened. The past is in the past, it's permanent, it's set. But that doesn't mean that you're powerless. Repair is possible. And in fact, repair can sometimes make the relationship stronger than it was before. Making amends is not about erasing the past. It's about proving reliability in the present. It's about saying, I failed, but I'm here now, and I will show up differently. That's how trust is restored. Not through speeches, but through consistency. Here's the psychological payoff. When you make amends, you reduce the inner conflict inside, right? That shame creates. Instead of living in hiding, you face the truth. You begin to rebuild self-trust brick by brick. That process integrates your shadows. The parts of you that once acted out in secrecy can now become part of your conscious moral life. Take the example of a partner who cheats. They may never reconcile with the person they betrayed. The relationship might end. But if they do the work of making amends, acknowledging the harm, expressing remorse, taking steps to ensure it doesn't happen again, they restore their own integrity. And even if the partnership doesn't survive, they carry forward with less secrecy, less shame, more honesty and courage. And that makes future intimacy possible. Without repair, they drag shame into the next relationship and repeat the cycle. In the professional world, the stakes are different, but just as real. Suppose a manager takes credit for their team's work in a meeting. They could stay silent, hope no one noticed, and live with a gnawing sense of fraudulence. Or they could make amends, go back to the team, acknowledge what they did, give public credit at the next opportunity, and commit to a different standard. The first path destroys trust, undermines it. The second builds a reputation for humility and fairness, even after failure. And here's something Michael Sandel might emphasize. Making amends isn't just about your personal healing. It's relational. Our moral worth is tested in the way that we respond to the people we have harmed. Guilt can guide you toward repair. Shame tempts you to hide. But only responsibility, acted out in real amends, creates the possibility of trust again. Now, repair doesn't always mean reconciliation. If you drove drunk and caused an accident, you can't undo that harm. But you can take ownership. You can apologize to those affected. You can cover damages, do community service, and commit to sobriety. But that doesn't erase the pain. But it demonstrates that you are no longer running from it, and that changes how you live with yourself. In relationships, the same principle applies. If you betray trust, you can't undo the betrayal, but you can live differently. You can prove over time that you are capable of honesty, courage, accountability, and consistency. That is how amends work, not as a single event, but as an ongoing practice. And the hard truth is, not everyone will forgive you. Not everyone should. Forgiveness isn't the same as repair. Sometimes the other person moves on and you are left with your own guilty conscience. That's where self-trust becomes crucial. Making amends isn't actually just for them. It's for you. It's how you quiet the voice inside that says you are a fraud, you are a coward, and you can't face what you did. By facing it, by having the courage to take responsibility, you integrate those shadow parts into your conscious self. Those shadow parts are actually looking out for you. They're calling you out for your own good. C.S. Lewis once described the moral life as learning to steer between pride and despair. Making amends is one of those steering acts. Too much pride and you deny the harm. Too much despair and you collapse into shame and self-pity. But responsibility down the middle, responsibility, taking the step to repair, keeps you upright. So let me leave you with this. The people around you don't need perfection. They need reliability. They need to know that when you mess up, and of course you will, you won't vanish into shame or deflect blame. You'll face it head on. You will repair what can be repaired, and you will keep showing up. That's how trust grows stronger, not weaker, through the trials of failure over time. Because in the end, what makes you trustworthy isn't that you never fall short. It's that when you do, you have the courage to make amends and have the strength to keep going. Okay, let's bring this home. Guilt and shame can look similar at first glance, but they take us in opposite directions. Guilt, when it's healthy, points you back towards repair. It tells you, that act was beneath your standards. Now go make it right. Shame is toxic. Shame, it corrodes. It doesn't say that was wrong. It says you are wrong. And when you believe that, you stop repairing and you start hiding in self-pity. The bridge out of hiding is responsibility. Not the self-pitying kind of responsibility where you collapse into despair and say, I'm just broken. I'll never be good enough. That is actually not responsibility. That's self-indulgence. Real responsibility is clear. It names the harm, accepts the impact, and then takes action to repair what can be repaired. And here's the key takeaway. You are not defined by the worst thing you have done. You're defined by what you do next, by how you respond once you have fallen short, by the courage that you bring to the repair. So, here are some questions I want you to sit with this week. Where have you let yourself down recently? What's the thing you feel guilty about, but maybe haven't had the courage to face head on? What are you hiding, either from yourself or from someone you have harmed? And instead of pushing that feeling away, what if you looked closer? What if you treated that guilt not as a curse, but as a moral compass? And then ask yourself, what repair is within your power this week? It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be an honest conversation that you've been avoiding, or it could be a simple acknowledgement, or it could be making amends in a small but concrete, specific way. Your shadows, your failures, your guilt, they don't have to be the end of your story. Instead, actually, they are the start. They are the trigger for your growth and your breakthroughs. The choice is whether you keep hiding in shame or you step into responsibility and begin to rebuild trust, both with others and with yourself. That's the path to real moral strength and true lasting fulfillment. Thank you so much for listening. If this has helped you in any way, please share it with anyone else who you think could benefit from it. If you liked it, hit a like or give it a good rating on whatever platform you're listening to this on. If you have any feedback whatsoever, I'd love to get it. Leave a comment, send me a message. I'd love to hear your feedback. I look forward to welcoming you to the next episode. Until then, David Tian, signing out.